What's good? It's Wood. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We have Juan Francisco Estrada, 43 wins and 3 losses versus Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, 51 wins and 3 losses. This is the trilogy fight between the two, and you could actually say that this one is a rubber match, with Chocolatito winning in their first fight back in 2012, and then recently, March of 2021, Juan Francisco Estrada winning a very close and somewhat disputed split decision over Chocolatito in one of the best fights of 2021. Probably not the fight of the year, but certainly one of the candidates for fight of the year. This fight is for the vacant WBC Super-Flyweight title, although the title itself is probably the least important thing when it comes to this rubber match. You know, Chocolatito has been doing it for so long that I don't think that people fully grasp his career. And that's largely because, he won his first title back in 2008, and this guy was a minimum weight champion for like a few years, and he moved up to light flyweight, won a belt there, and then defended it successfully several times. And then he went to flyweight like in 2013, won a belt in 2014, the WBC belt, defended that successfully several times, and then he went up to super flyweight, where, after winning his first fight there versus Carlos Cuadras, he then had the back-to-back fights versus Srisaket Rungvisai, where he lost a close, another disputed majority decision to Rungvisai, and then in the rematch got knocked out, obliterated in the 4th round, and that was 2017. And so by that time, with seeing Chocolatito just on his back and out, a lot of people thought that that might have been a wrap for him career-wise. But you've got to keep in mind, by the time he went to super flyweight, where he would have those back-to-back losses versus Srisaket Rungvisai, entering into that first fight against Rungvisai, he was 46-0. Having won belts in 4 different divisions. And, he didn't even come into the United States and start fighting there until like 2012. He was already a 2-division champion by the time he even fought in the States. And it would be another like 2 or 3 years before you started seeing him featured on Triple G undercards, around the time that Gonzalez and Triple G were both 2 of the 3 or 4 best pound-for-pound fighters in the sport. So Chocolatito, he was a champion, a multi-division champion, who was still flying under the radar for years before he started reaching a wider audience on HBO. So by the time we started seeing him on those Triple G undercards, like in 2015, October of 2015, he fought Brian Valoria on the Triple G versus David Lemieux undercard. So by that time, he was already like a 3-division champ, ready to then take on his 4th division. So the longevity of Chocolatito, I think, sometimes goes unrecognized and unacknowledged. So when we see him getting knocked out by Rungvisai, I'm sure a lot of people who hadn't seen a ton of Chocolatito, even though they had heard the HBO broadcast speak glowingly of him, they might have been thinking, oh, I don't see what the big fuss is about. Well, it's like he was already into his 30s and had already had over 40 fights, was undefeated through his first 46 fights. So I just don't want that to go unnoticed when you are looking at the legacy of Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez. And Juan Estrada doesn't have such a bad resume himself. He was like a long-time flyweight champion. He had lost his first title opportunity in the division before that, just below that, at light flyweight. He had lost to Chocolatito when Estrada was challenging Chocolatito for his then light flyweight title. So after Estrada's 2012 loss to Chocolatito, he then went on like a 10-fight winning streak and then went up a division. He had won the flyweight title, defended that one successfully several times, and then he went up to super flyweight, where in 2018 he lost a majority decision, another very close fight, to Srisaket Rungvisai. This is shortly after Rungvisai knocked out Chocolatito, and then Estrada got a rematch against Rungvisai about 3 or 4 fights later, and that's where Estrada won the WBC Super Flyweight title in that unanimous decision win against Rungvisai. And Rungvisai, by the way, in that fight, he looked ultra flat. It didn't look like the same Sor Rungvisai that entered the ring against him the first time. Damn sure didn't look like the same Sor Rungvisai who fought those back-to-back fights versus Chocolatito Gonzalez. But Estrada earned the WBC Super-Flyweight belt in that win against Sor Rungvisai, and that was the belt that he held over the next few fights and just vacated after his subsequent win against Chocolatito in 2021. So he vacated the title. He was supposed to fight, I believe, Franco. That's Bam Rodriguez's brother. And Estrada also vacated the WBA Super Flyweight title that he won in that super close rematch against Chocolatito. So in this fight, again, it's only the WBC Super Flyweight title that's on the line here. So in Estrada, you've got a 2-division champion. In Chocolatito, you've got a 4-division champion. So how do I assess this trilogy fight, this rubber match between Estrada and Chocolatito? Well, if you look at their most recent fights, and by the way, both of these guys, with the exception of Gonzalez losing the back-to-back fights against Sor Rungvisai, both of these guys have pretty much beaten the who's who in the division. They both have a win over Carlos Cuadras. In fact, Estrada has 2 wins over Cuadras. No, neither of these guys have yet fought Bam Rodriguez, but Bam Rodriguez just went back to 112. I'm sure he's going to be back at 115 sooner rather than later. And these guys, neither of these guys have fought Bam Rodriguez's brother, Franco, as well. So aside from them, they've pretty much fought the who's who in the division. But if we're looking at the rematch between these two, it was interesting because Estrada usually has his best moments when he's skillfully fighting off his back foot, letting Roman Gonzalez come forward, which Roman Gonzalez is great at throwing those two-handed attack combinations, changing angles a ton, throwing very short punches. He doesn't throw a ton of looping punches, very sharp, very short punches, but his movement is pretty underrated. He's very good at throwing 3 to 4 punches, sidestepping, throwing another 2 punches, sidestepping, and just taking very subtle but sophisticated angles. Cuadras, again, is a little bit more back foot between the two, although in this rematch, you had both of these guys going forward. You had both of these guys getting back up and backing up in different times. There were so many ebbs and flows in Estrada versus Gonzalez too. You could argue that Gonzalez probably won maybe 3 out of the first 4 rounds. I thought Estrada pretty much held it down in the middle rounds and kind of took control of the fight. And then Roman Gonzalez finished very strong in the fight where he probably won like 2 out of the last 3 rounds. So this was a very, very tough fight to score. But you know, I watched this fight like 3 or 4 times now. And every time I watch it, I'm a little bit more convinced that Chocolatito should have probably edged this one. But again, it was a difficult fight to score. And when you have so many ebbs and flows, so many punches thrown per round, it is pretty difficult to score. But it seemed like the public consensus was that Roman Gonzalez should have won the fight. And I think that that's reflected in the betting odds heading into this rubber match. Like right now, I think the odds stand at Roman Gonzalez being a slight favorite, like a -175. So he's actually a slightly bigger favorite than he was just a couple of months ago. A couple of months ago, he was like a -144. Now he's a -175, almost a 2-to-1 favorite. And Estrada is almost a 2-to-1 underdog. And again, it's not only because most people thought Gonzalez should have beaten Estrada in the rematch, but also if you look at both of these guys' last fights, where Estrada in September, just a couple of months ago, fought RG Cortez, and Chocolatito fought Julio Cesar Martinez, who was coming up from 112, the division below. Roman Gonzalez had a much better showing than Estrada. Yes, they both did win their fights, but Gonzalez did so much more emphatically, and it was a bigger name that he did it against, even though, again, his opponent was coming up from the division below. And Estrada was supposed to more or less not make easy work, but demonstratively beat RG Cortez. And it was a very difficult fight for Estrada. He got hurt in that fight against Cortez. He got backed up. He was losing a few of the rounds, and it looked like, oh my gosh, are we on our way to a Cortez upset over Juan Francisco Estrada? Well, Estrada had to dig deep, and he did just that. He battled back. He showed a ton of resilience, determination, took control of the fight, ended up winning a unanimous decision. I didn't really agree with the scorecards, but this was a close scare for Estrada. And also, before Estrada's rematch against Roman Gonzalez, when he fought Cuadras in their rematch, he did stop Cuadras in the 11th round, but Cuadras actually dropped Estrada in that fight. So Estrada's been showing a bit more vulnerability, and it's interesting. Going into this trilogy fight, you're thinking like something's got to give because neither of these guys are young fighters. Gonzalez is 35, Estrada is 32. And keep in mind, again, when Estrada was getting knocked out by Sor Rungvisai, it made a lot of people question what his path forward would look like. But here we are 5 years later, and Gonzalez has been great. Yes, he did lose that very close and disputed rematch to Estrada, but performance by performance, fight by fight, Chocolatito has looked fantastic. But again, something's got to give. And I don't know who is closer to hitting the cliff between Estrada and Chocolatito. Now, Chocolatito is kind of the naturally smaller fighter. Again, he was a minimum weight back in the day. So he came from the very, very small weight classes. And there's like a 1 inch height advantage here for Estrada. We're talking like 5'4" versus 5'3", 2 inch reach advantage for Estrada, 66 inch versus 64 inch. But once the bullets start flying between these two, because of Chocolatito's angle taking, Estrada's reach, when he's not backing up skillfully and trying to fight off his back foot, like I feel like that's when his reach comes into play. But when he obliges Chocolatito in the firefight, that reach is all but gone. And then he leans forward a little bit too, to where they're almost like head to head for much of the fight. And I wonder if this trilogy is going to be more or less action-packed than their second fight. I tend to believe you can't get much more action-packed than their rematch. So I think it's going to be a little bit less eventful. But nah, both of these guys have so much pride. Both of these guys throw so many punches. And both of these guys like to respond to getting hit by combinations with returning fire in the next exchange or the next opportunity for an exchange. So I think we're going to get a lot of excitement. Is this fight going to result in a stoppage? Like imagine that. Imagine how dramatic it would be if one guy finishes the other guy. And I wouldn't be totally surprised if one of these two guys doesn't seem like themselves or just seems a bit flat going into this trilogy fight. Like, we might get both of these guys on their A game, but I almost feel it's nearly as likely that one of these guys is not going to look like themselves in this third fight. And if that's the case, which one of these two guys will it be? Because a part of me was thinking Estrada in his last fight against RG Cortez didn't look like he was on his A game or anywhere near it. But I mean, I would have to think that it's probably Chocolatito who's a little bit closer to the cliff, if you will. But I think that he will make his last successful stand here. I think that he's actually going to be the more consistent puncher with those combinations that he throws. I think that he's going to be landing pretty cleanly against Estrada. Yes, I think Estrada's going to land cleanly against Chocolatito as well. And Estrada, by the way, when he goes to the body, he was super effective. And when he was just blasting Gonzalez with straight rights, that was working as well. But I just think that Gonzalez is going to be the more consistent volume puncher here between the two. I feel like Estrada sometimes gets into a mode where he waits just a little bit and he waits for Gonzalez to get cooking to then return fire as opposed to initiating the fire. But again, I think that in this fight, just like in the last fight, I think you're going to get tons of ebbs and flows. But I think that the result in this one is going to be Roman Gonzalez edging like a 115, 113 split decision type of win against Estrada. Again, just imagine if one of these guys stops the other. That would be something else. I also wouldn't be surprised if this trilogy fight, rubber match, results in a draw. I know that nobody wants to hear it because, I mean, do you have to win? Do you have to then fight a fourth fight if this fight results in a draw? But I just feel like it's so possible. And I don't want to do the cop-out prediction and actually predict a draw. I was kind of thinking about doing that for this one because I think that it's that possible. But I think that Roman Gonzalez is going to get a little bit more love on the scorecards in this rubber match than he did in the rematch. And I think that the luck, if you will, or the fates, or, you know, just the judging favor is going to tip in his direction this time around. And I'm going Roman Gonzalez via majority decision or split decision win. But yeah, let me know what you think. It's also very possible that Estrada just still has more gas in the tank than Roman Gonzalez does. And it's possible Roman Gonzalez comes into this fight flat, might even get stopped by Estrada. Nothing with this trilogy fight would surprise me. But I'm going to take Gonzalez via split decision win here. But yeah, let me know what you think about Estrada versus Chocolatito 3. Who do you have winning this one and how? And also, I'm just going to throw this question out there. Bam Rodriguez will inevitably come back to the division. And I know that he's kind of leaving some space for his brother to operate and win belts in the division. But would you favor either Estrada or Chocolatito over Bam Rodriguez at 115 right now? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. I am going to get my voice back, by the way. It's been a long, like an illness. It's unrelenting cough and cold, but I will get back on point. Thanks for tuning in, guys.